Absolutely. Fire away.
Okay, let's do it. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out for the show today.
Great to meet you.
So let's begin our journey with this. I always start with this question. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing everything about our lives. There was a lot going on. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you approach life today?
Um, but it changed my life like it did everybody's. We were trying to do what the science or the so-called science was telling us, and I worked for ODOT, Oklahoma Department of Transportation. We were considered essential. So, we were just trying to follow the science and we had to keep working. There was no working from home as far as what I did for a living. I was a maintenance superintendent for Woodward County. So, anything that you could do to the road or on the right of way beside the road, I was in charge of that. So we had to work. So we just had to kind of grin and bear with it until they got everything figured out and it pretty much passed over us. And, there was people that I knew that were affected, passed away, but, we had to work. We had to just soldier through, put your head down and do what they said and carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's get into what you do. There's a lot going on between being a content creator, a writer. You love the outdoors. So let's get into. I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds. It's career day. And one of the kids wants to know what you do for a living. How do you explain it?
Well, right now I'm retired.
Okay.
I worked 43 years for ODOT, and then in February, 1st of February, I retired.
Okay.
But um, I can tell you how I came to be a writer,
Sure.
and kind of by accident, really. I mean, I've always enjoyed writing and reading, but especially reading. And I've always been a storyteller. Um, one one October, maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we were at Canton Lake, which is a popular lake in northwest Oklahoma. They have a walleye fishing tournament there every year. Just here in a couple weeks, in fact, it's going to be the next one. And excuse me. Anyway, we were out there in October with family and friends, and the weather was just terrible. It was wet, it was cold, it was windy. So we're all sitting around a campfire, and of course, I'm telling stories. And my nieces and nephews, there was a couple of them there, and they kept telling me, they said, "Uncle Rob, you need to write a book. You got some great stories. You need to write a book." And I was like, well then the bad weather continued, and so I kept telling stories, and they just, pretty insistent. Seriously, you've got some great stories. You need to tell a book. You need to write a book. So that evening, I got in on my tablet inside the camper, and I just started writing stories. Before we left to go home, I had like 8 stories, and then I wound up doing maybe 4 more and polished them up a little bit, and then I was like, okay, now what? I've got them. They're wrote down. I don't know whether they're any good or not. Now what? So I had some other people read them, and they suggested Amazon. So I looked into that process. And anyway, after a while, sure enough, I had a book on Amazon. I called it Campfire Tales from Uncle Rob.
Right on.
So, and I got pretty good feedback from it. So, fast forward a couple of years, and there's 4 volumes to Campfire Tales from Uncle Rob. Well, then I was kind of out of stories that I thought were book worthy. You know, all the stories in the Campfire Tales from Uncle Rob book are true. They happened to me while I was out hunting and fishing, except for the last story in the 4th volume, and it doesn't have anything to do with me being out hunting and fishing. It was just a event that happened to me when I was about 12, 13 years old that I wanted to tell that story. So I included it. But the rest of them all happened when I was out, hunting and fishing. There was funny stories, creepy, really strange stories. Sometimes they're both. They're creepy and funny, you know.
Yeah.
Some of them I just, tried to tell an interesting story about something that interesting that happened. anyway, I was kind of out of stories that I thought, that were interesting enough to be in a book. So, and I'd had these other stories rolling around in my mind for years and years and years. So I thought, well, I'll write one of those. So I wrote one, a fiction story, kind of in the, I guess you'd call it cryptid thriller horror genre. I called it Red Eyes at Black Mesa. That was out like November last year, 2025. And then just a few weeks ago, I put another one out, and it's the longest story that I've done so far. It's called Have Dog Will Travel, and it's kind of in the same vein as the other one. It's kind of a cryptid horror thriller, and it's about a boy 12 years old is camping with his parents at a lake by a river, and this young fella, all he wants is to go fishing, and he wants a dog, and his parents won't let him have a dog. They, don't think he's ready. Well, that night while they're at their camp, they tell him he can have a dog. So he's on top of the world. And they hear and see a few strange things before they crawl in the tent. Well, that night something comes into their camp, and their dad, the only weapon he has is a Bowie knife that was passed down to him. So he grabs the Bowie knife and goes out into the camp to frighten off this bear or whatever they think whatever's out there. Well, it's not a bear. Anyway, winds up killing the parents. The boy survives. He escapes. And then he's at the hospital, and nobody will believe his story about what he saw. But his aunt shows up, and she believes him, and she kind of adopts him, takes him into her home. And the story is about him growing up, making new friends, going to school, going to college, and then going back to the lake where his parents died and looking for the monster that killed his folks. And then he finally does get a dog, and the dog is an integral part in helping him on his quest.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, what were you reading growing up? What were some inspirational
Oh man, I
stories?
read comic books. I read. I tell this in a note from the author. I think in the end of this current book, I read all kinds of things. When I was 5 years old, my dad's cousin Cleo, she lived up in Kansas. She gave me a hardback copy of Treasure Island when I was 5.
Yeah,
And I still have that book, by the way. I'm 62 now, so.
yeah,
But I read, it took me a while to get that read, and um, like I say, I grew up in a small town. Our elementary school, the classrooms, the class I was in, there was two. They split us into two classes, and we were right across the hall from each other. But they had their own little mini libraries inside the classrooms, and we had like and when I was in second grade, I guess it was a competition. I guess anyway, you would read a book, do a book report, and the teacher, she'd made us all centipedes, like the head of a centipede. And then when you read a book, did a book report, she would add a little round body piece to the centipede. So as more books you read, the longer your centipede was. And mine circled the room. I read a bunch of books, and then I discovered the local public library, and I would go up there and check out books to read. And the first ones that I remember reading was the Hardy Boys.
yeah.
Uh, and they were written and published like back in the 30s and 40s. They were like the original. And I read all of those, however many they had in there. And there was one, number 4, Hardy Boys number 4 is called The Missing Chums. And the end of the book was missing. I don't know how many pages was gone. I was reading along, and all of a sudden the story ends. I'm like, what the heck,
Yeah.
So I spent decades looking for. We'd go into an old bookstore and I'd look for Hardy Boys #4, The Missing Chums, you know. And I finally, anyway, I go into the public library up there, and I'm always browsing around for a book that would catch my eye. And I eventually meander over to whether the section the Hardy Boys were in. Well, they're not there. And I'm like, what happened to these books were ancient. They were taped together. So I finally went over and asked the librarian, and she said, "Oh, we've got some new ones." And she pulled this box out, and they were new. They had color covers, different pictures. And I said, "Okay." And she said, "We're replacing those old ones." And she said, "By the way, you've read all those old ones like 3 or 4 times. I've got them boxed up here. Would you like them? We're just going to throw them in the dumpster." And I'm like, "Heck yeah, I want them."
Yeah.
So I packed this box of Hardy Boys books home, and man, it was heavy. But I made it home. I still have those books too.
Wow.
So, like the next weekend, I go back up to the public library, and she's got all the new Hardy Boys books out. So the first one I check out, The Missing Chums, #4. I want to finish the story. Well, as soon as I start reading it, I realize it's not the same story. They've updated it to it's in the 70s. This one was written. It's not the same story. So I still don't have the ending to that.
Oh.
So decades later, my wife and I were in a used bookstore in Tulsa, and I found that book,
Yeah.
the original. And so I finally got to finish it. But man, it took years, and I had no idea that I figured it was just the same stories, the
Yeah.
same titles by the same author. Of course, it was a pen name for somebody, Franklin W. Dixon wrote the Hardy Boys. But
Yeah.
so, and I read everything that my mom and dad read Westerns like Max Brand, Luke Shore, of course, Louis L'Amour. So I would read their books,
Yeah.
but I just love to read, and I read fast. I could read fast, so I was lucky.
Yeah.
But
So when you were a kid, when you were like at that career day age, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
oh wow, my original thought was, and this was back when I was like junior high. I wanted to be a veterinarian,
Yeah.
and because I love dogs. But then had to have to go to the vet and have a dog put down, and the vet was crying, and I was like, "There's no way I can do
Yeah.
that." It's hard enough when it's your dog. But
Oh,
I was like, I can't do it.
yeah.
So that was out. And then I thought, when I went off to college to OU, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started in architecture because I could draw a little bit, and about a semester or so, when I kind of figured out I didn't care for that, it was costing me too much money for one thing, because all the projects that we had to do, and I had to go down to campus corner and buy all these materials, and I said I can't. So I switched to art, and I liked it a lot better. And I think I just got tired of school.
Yeah.
So I came home and I thought, I'll just take a summer off and I'll go back, or I'll take the semester off. I'll go back in January. I'll work a little bit. So I got a job with ODOT, and 43 years later, I was only 19 hours from graduating. It was stupid, really, not to go back, but I didn't do it. I got a job, and then the first thing you know, I've bought a vehicle, bought a house, got bills. I'm like, shoot, I can't, I
Yeah.
just kind of got into that trap, and 43 years later, I retired. But I worked my way up. I started in the traffic crew, uh, which was back then was the sign crew, the center line crew, and the bridge crew. And I worked on all three of those and liked it. And I was there for 12 years, and then I was ready for a change. Pardon me. And this was in Buffalo, Oklahoma, which where the division headquarters was. You know, the state's divided up in divisions. And I heard the guy that back then we called him county foreman, that he was the one that Woodward was retiring, and I knew him. So anyway, so I talked to the division engineer, the big boss up there one day, and had told him I was really interested in that job down there. Whenever that guy retired, he looked at me kind of funny. He's like, really? I said, yeah, I'm interested. I want to do something different. And I was a supervisor of my crew. So anyway, a couple of weeks later, I'm in my office. I've got all the guys in there fixing to give out, you know, job assignments for the day. And my immediate boss sticks his head in my office and looks at me and says, hey, Rob, come down here to Mr. Ward's office. I'm sure. And he back out down the hall. I'm looking at all my guys. I'm like, all right, what you clowns do now? You know,
Yeah.
what am I getting yanked in on the carpet for? They're like, we didn't do nothing. Yeah, that's what you always say. So anyway, so I go down there and they're all in there. The division engineer, the maintenance engineer, the two area managers, you know, all the guys immediately over me. So they come on in, shut the door. This is bad. When you have to shut the door, it's bad.
Yeah.
Go, what happened? So I go in and sit down, and they said, are you still interested in the Woodward job? Yeah, I am. They said, good. You can start today. I'm like, today? Wait a minute. He's still down there. And they said, well, yeah, we know, but he's got like 2-3 months left. But you can go down there and just ride with him and have him show you, you know, everything that, you know, you need to ride with him and learn what you can from him. But you're going to be the new boss down there. So you just go down. They're working between Woodward and Moreland on Highway 50. You just go out there and tell them you're going to be their new boss. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And finally, one of the area managers goes, no, that's not the way to do that. You know, I'll go over there with him and we'll talk to the boss that's there. And, you know, I was like, thank God. So anyway, that's what we did. And we got that guy, and we got him in the car with us and told him, he was, what's going on? So, oh, well, whenever you retire, Rob's going to take over for you. We just thought maybe he could come down and ride with you, you know, till you're gone. And because we know you're going to be taking time off too before you leave. He said, what do you think about that? He's like, oh, I don't care. Yeah, that's fine with me. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I was in there for a year, but I didn't actually have the position. I was just acting.
Yeah.
So they finally, after a year, they opened it up. And I had heard all kinds of stories about, I heard like 10 to 12 people was putting in for this job. And I'm thinking, oh, man, it's going to be bad. So finally, the day of the interview, you know, I drive up there, I go in the office, and they're all in there again, the same cast of characters sitting there. Have a seat. So I'm sitting there, and they're talking about feeding their cows, fishing, and this job that needed done over at this end of the division and something on over there. And I'm watching the clock, and finally it's time, and they just keep talking about all this other stuff. And finally it's like 10 minutes after, and there's a little lull in the conversation, and I'm like, okay, let's have this interview. And they looked at me, and this is it. I said, what do you mean this is it? And I said, you're the only one that applied. Congratulations. And I'm like, and then they just hee-hawed and laughed. You know, they enjoyed watching me squirm. I'm like, you dirty, golly.
Yeah.
So, and that was like 96 probably. So 30 years later, the way I retired. And I'm so glad that I did. And I'm glad I invested the way that I did. So that's one thing young people, and I used to tell my guys, even if they weren't, you guys need to invest for your retirement.
Yeah.
I know when you're 20 years old, you're 25, you're 30, you don't think about that. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. If you're planning on staying here and making a career out of this.
Yeah.
I wished I'd have started a lot earlier than I did, but
Yeah.
it turned out okay.
Yeah. So who's been kind of a hero for you, an inspiration that's allowed you to live your life this way, to write and to to have this success that you've had in your life?
Um, that's a good question. I've never thought about that before. Um, Ali, I guess I'd have to say my mom.
Yeah.
Uh, when I was like second grade, third grade, my folks split up and divorced. And my dad, I loved him, but he was not. My little sisters, he was not a dad to them ever, really. I had a dad for 6, 7 years, but then I didn't. And so he left, and there was no support of any. He was just gone. And my mother put her, she went through nursing school while she was still working to provide for her kids. And sorry,
Oh, you're okay.
lost her a few years ago to cancer.
Yeah.
I don't usually do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, she was the
All good.
strongest person I ever knew.
Sure. Yeah. So
Sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. So I want to switch gears here real quick.
Thank you.
As an outdoorsman, I'm curious. I grew up, my dad was born in Brooklyn, raised in Long Island, and he loved
Oh, yeah.
fishing.
Wow.
He'd get us up in the morning. He'd play Neil Diamond, Coming to America. We'd be sitting back there in the early part of the morning, and he'd just be saying, "The early bird gets the worm," and just
Yeah.
like getting us worked up.
Times.
And
That's right.
and I was the kind of guy that would just catch sunfish for like 3 or 4 hours because I love the adrenaline of that bobber going down like a
Sure.
casino slot machine. I just wanted everything to keep flipping. So
Yep.
my question to you is, in all of your years of going out and gaming, what's the best fish? What's the best moment that you had?
That's a good question. Um, I mean, I've caught so many fish, a lot of big fish. Uh, I think one time I have to tell you this story. Where a good buddy of mine, his name was Gary. He's in a lot of my stories and my Uncle Rob books. We used to fish together at the Walleye Rodeo, the Walleye tournament at Canton Lake, and we were out with him, and boat broke down. So luckily, we had a couple other buddies there, and they both had boats, and one of them they one was fishing with the other one. So this one guy named Jake, he had a big pontoon boat. He said, "You guys can use my boat. We're not using it. We're going out on his boat." Man, that's cool. So we're out there on this boat, and it was very nice. It's like a 26-foot pontoon, and it's beautiful. So we're out there fishing on it in the middle of the lake, and I got snagged up on something that broke off. And Gary and I like to drift fish for walleye. So anyway, and there was a walleye local man who was a walleye guide there, and he had gave us some live leeches to try. So we had these leeches. So and we're using night crawlers and leeches, and we're drifting along, and I broke off, so I was back under. It was hot, sun was out, middle of the day, and I was back under the canopy on the boat, retying this one line. And I looked up, and my rod on the bow was just bent over. It was about touching the water. So I went up there, and I thought it was hung up too. So I'm pulling on it, and then I felt this fish shake his head. I'm like, I'm hung all right in something's mouth. So it was like 20. I've only got 8 pound test, and there's people, I'm fighting this fish, and I can't horse him because 8 pound test.
Yeah.
Eventually, I got him up, and people would come by or pull up to us. What do you got? I don't know. I can't get him up. Well, eventually, I got it up, and it was like a 15.7 channel cat. I'd caught like 30 foot of water
Yeah.
drifted. And that tournament they had, you got a trophy, and some money for like the biggest species that's in the lake. So nobody caught a bigger channel cat that year. So I got the trophy and a check for the channel cat.
Right on.
But I don't know. That story just popped in my
Yeah,
head.
that's great. I love it. I love it. So let me ask you this: after all of these years of working and now writing and everything that you've gone through and that you've become, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, everyone that gets your books, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, first off, uh, I think that everybody that knows me knows I'm a man of my word. That's the way I was raised. If I tell you something, you can take it to the bank.
Yeah.
And if something happens where I can't do what I told you I was going to do, uh, there's a pretty good reason why, and I'm going to let you know. I won't no show you. I will let you know. Hey, this came up. I'm going to be late, or I'm going to. But that's always been important to me. I'm a man of my word. If I tell you something, you can take it to the bank and borrow money with it. I mean, it's like gold. Uh, I mean, I don't know. Other than that, I really don't know. I like to laugh. I've got a pretty good sense of humor. I've got some buddies that we get together and we just crack each other up. And my wife's sitting there looking at us like, really, guys? I mean, we like one of us will quote a line from a movie and the other one says the next line. That kind of a deep friendship deal. And we just crack each other up. We have
Yeah.
a great time. And I love being outdoors. My grandpa Bowers loved to fish, and my dad, my cousin Rusty, loved to fish. I was lucky enough. There's some older guys, and they're in my books, who were way better fishermen than me. I was lucky enough to get to go fishing with them. They asked me, "Would you like to go?" Well, heck yeah, I'll go. And I learned a lot from them. There was a guy named Harold, a guy named Red, and Gary. I learned a lot from all three of those guys. Um, Probably learn something from everybody that you go fishing with. If you spend the day with them, you're going to learn something,
Yeah.
and hopefully people learn something from me. I love taking kids fishing.
Yeah.
I love taking my nieces, my nephews, especially. Uh, they're in some of my stories too. Uh, we tease each other and just have a good time. It's not about catching fish; it's about making memories. Really, I mean,
Absolutely.
you're out there
Yeah.
experiencing things with somebody else. I mean, I go fishing by myself too, and I've had funny things and strange things happen to me while I'm by myself. But uh, it's the experience really.
Yep.
It's not called catching; it's called fishing,
Absolutely.
hunting.
Yep.
So, but I've always enjoyed that. Out by the water, out in the woods. Uh, Grew up hunting too. I love to bird hunt, quail, pheasant, dove, turkey. I love that. My dad loved to quail hunt and fish. He kind
So
of
so I'm
installed that into me.
Yeah, no, I get it. So let me ask you this. If anybody wants to pick up the Campfire series, is Amazon the best place to go?
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
they're all on Amazon. You can search Campfire Tales from Uncle Rob. They'll come up.
Okay. I will put
They're in
all
Kindle. They're in Kindle Unlimited paperback. They're
Okay.
in audio format. So,
Good
but,
deal. Yeah. I
I,
will
I like to think that as I've progressed in my writing career, I've got better at it.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, those first that first book, the stories are genuine. They're true. Looking back, I would think, if I wrote that today, I would probably do that a little different. The story doesn't change.
Sure.
Still the same thing happened, but the way I and of course those books are all in the first person. They're my buddy Dale and or I was over here when this happened. When I went to the fiction, I went to the third person. She went there and this happened. That kind of.
Yeah. Well, that's just evolution right there. So
Yeah.
I will make sure to get all of these links in the show notes. Thank you so much for opening up the portal. People have their they've got a taste, and now they can go out and get the books in earnest. Thank you so much for taking a minute out
Well,
today.
thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
wonderful.
I hope people read my books. I hope they like them. And leave me a review. People
Yes.
don't understand how much that helps authors, especially independent authors.
It's absolutely huge, yeah. And I will make sure to have all these links in there. I will have this interview done tomorrow, so I'll send you over links. And again, great to meet you. I'm glad we had the chance to run into each other, and send my love to Oklahoma.
Thank
man.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm sorry.